Today I'm going to finish up my gospel fictions videos. First, I want to address the beginning of this video directly at the Christians who find their way to these videos one way or another. I want you to understand, you have a problem with me. You don't like me. You don't like me because I am bursting your bubble. The truth is hard. The truth is virtually always messy. Because you don't like the message that I bring does not mean that the message I bring is false. You have constructed this world of yours based on a lie. And just because I point these lies out doesn't make me a wicked person. Doesn't make my wife a wicked person. If you have any sense at all, you will realize that the Holy Spirit that you believe in moves through us. Your time is drawing to an end. And you can continue to kick against the pricks, or you can actually sit back and realize that you too have something to learn. A fool tells themselves, there's nothing else for me to learn. I know everything. Jesus is the answer. It's your choice. Be a fool. Act like a fool. Or open your ears and listen. Because you may have itching ears, and you may want to listen to the likes of other people online here who have nothing but bad intentions for you. Or you can listen to the hard truth. It's your choice. This book, one of a handful, really, of books out there that talk about the lies. The lies. This book was constructed for a purpose, and that purpose was to get and perpetuate power and ignorance. There's plenty good stuff in here, but don't be a fool. That's what all of our videos really are about. My wife and mine. Don't be a fool. Christendom is coming to an end. I can see it. The writing is on the wall. And I don't care how liberal a Christian you are. You're still believing in a lie. And when you believe in a lie, you do a lot of wrong things to perpetuate that lie, as Christendom has done throughout the years. Now, back to the book. Gospel Fictions. I found the dust cover. So, let's look today, talking first about the passion of the Christ, the gospel narrative. Starting on page 101 of the book, the great obstacle to the early success of Christianity was what Paul called the stumbling block of the cross. Jesus seems not the victorious Messiah, but an executed traitor in Jewish eyes. One accursed by God. Unless the cross could be seen as the ultimate triumph or the pathway to it, rather than a despairing tragedy it appears to be, the faith of the Christians seemed vain. But this revision of perspective is just what happened, and according to Luke, it occurred between Good Friday and Pentecost, about 7 weeks' time. From my God, why hast thou forsaken me? And they said nothing to anybody, for they were afraid. To Peter's supreme confidence at Pentecost is a great development. Men of Israel, listen to me. I speak of Jesus of Nazareth, a man singled out by God and made known to you through miracles, portents, and signs which God worked among you through him. And you well know, when he had been given up to you by the deliberate will and plan of God, you used heathen men to crucify and kill him, but God raised him to life again, setting him free from the pangs of death, because it could not be the death should keep him in its grip. Acts chapter 2. Mark refers to the Last Supper as the Passover. Paul, who is the real founder of the Christian church, in contrast, does not refer to the Last Supper as the Passover. Page 107. Referring to the Last Supper, the earliest account of this meal is Paul's, which makes no mention of Passover and assumes that the Lord's Supper is a full meal eaten regularly at Christian gatherings. Paul's account is obviously part of some kind of tradition that Mark drew upon and has clear Christian liturgical significance, with no paschal connotation at all. For the tradition which I handed on to you came to me from the Lord himself, that the Lord Jesus, on the night of his arrest, took bread, and after giving thanks to God, broke it and said, "This is my body which is given for you. For this as a memorial of me." In the same way, he took the cup after supper and said, "This cup is the new covenant, sealed by my blood. Wherever you drink it, do this in memorial for me." Mark's version of the tradition either had no liturgical significance, no, quote, "do this as a memorial," or Mark deliberately removed it. Moreover, the central biblical allusion in Mark's scene one not found in Paul's, is explicitly non-paschal, referring to the covenant seen at Sinai, which happened 3 months after the first Passover. During supper he took bread, and having said this, he blessed and broke it, gave it to them with the words, "Take this. This is my body." Then he took the cup, and having offered thanks to God, he gave it to them, and they all drank from it. And he said, "This is my blood, the blood of the covenant shed for many." Mark's source has Jesus allude to Exodus 24:8. "This is the blood of the covenant which the Lord has made with you." In Paul's version, the central biblical allusion is to Jeremiah 31:31. "I will make a new covenant with Israel and Judah." Another verse with no paschal significance. Though Mark calls it a Passover meal, his description of what happens there, which he found in the kind of tradition Paul had used, is not a description of a Passover meal. No bitter herbs are mentioned as required by Numbers 9:11, and no Passover liturgy is recited. Indeed, quote, Pes 10:5 attributes to R. Gamaliel, 1st century AD, a tradition that whoever does not mention the lamb, unleavened bread, and bitter herbs at the meal has not fulfilled his Passover obligations. Moreover, the arrest account that Mark inherited insisted that Jesus was not arrested during the Passover festival. Quote, "The chief priests and the doctors of the law were trying to devise some cunning plan to seize him and put him to death. It must not be during the festival," they said, or we could have rioting among the people. Mark's inherent tradition of the Lord's Supper that was already part of the Christian liturgy and fictionally turned into the Passover meal for his own theological purposes, which became clear in the introduction to his account in 14:12. Quote, "Now on the first day of unleavened bread, when the Passover lambs were being slaughtered, his disciples said to him, 'Where would you like us to go and prepare for your Passover supper?' So," unquote. So even though the cup word, quote, "my blood, the blood of the covenant," unquote, is not a Passover saying in Mark's narrative, Jesus' blood is for Mark nonetheless, symbolically equivalent to that of the Passover lamb. So here's a discrepancy, and it's one I'm familiar with since I used to be very involved, even to a point of being a minister of sorts, in the Worldwide Church of God, a splinter group at least for the Worldwide Church of God. And we called ourselves Sabbatarians, and we kept these feast days. Passover was one of them, of course. It's the main feast day. But we kept it as the Lord's Supper, the Last Supper. So it's pretty clearly indicated that although many Christians look at this as the Passover feast, it was not, in fact, the Passover feast. These things are right in here for us to see. It takes someone else from time to time to show it to us. Doesn't mean that we are somehow stupid because we don't know these things, which is sort of the anger that I seem to get from so many people, as though I'm calling them stupid. You know, stupidity is when you keep hearing something over and over again and you keep ignoring it, even though you know it's true. That's stupidity. What we're talking about is ignorance. There's nothing wrong with being ignorant, as long as after you've been revealed about these true things, then you don't remain in your ignorance. Let's talk about Judas and his death. Now, first of all, the very idea that someone needed to betray Christ is there's no real reason for it, except, again, for a gospel fiction, for them to incorporate this idea that the Christ needed a betrayer in order to fulfill the gospel writer's perception of what the supplicant says in what we now call the Old Testament, so that the Old Testament can be a foreshadowing of the Christ. Now, on page 115, here Randel Helms writes, still he gets, Matthew in his version of the story tells this, still he gets his facts wrong in a very revealing way. When Judas the traitor saw that Jesus had been condemned, he was seized with remorse and returned the 30 silver pieces to the chief priests and elders. I have sinned, he said. I have brought an innocent man to his death. But they said, what is that to us? See to that yourself. So he threw the money down in the temple and left them, and went and hanged himself. Taking up the money, the chief priest argued, this cannot be put in the temple fund. It is blood money. So after conferring, they used it to buy the potter's field as a burial place for foreigners. This explains the name, quote, Blood Acre, by which the field has been known ever since. And in this way, fulfillment was given to the prophetic utterance of Jeremiah. They took the 30 silver pieces, the price set on a man's head, that for his price among the Israelites, and gave the money to the potter's field, as the Lord directed me. Fiction. As it happened, the passage Matthew quotes is not from Jeremiah at all, but it's a muddled paraphrase of Zechariah 11:12 through 13. I said to them, if it suits you, give me my wages, otherwise keep them. Then they weighed out my wages, 30 pieces of silver. The Lord said to me, throw it into the treasury. Here the Hebrew literally reads, throw it to the potter. I took the 30 pieces of silver, the noble sum at which I was valued and rejected by them, and threw them to the house of the Lord, into the treasury. That Matthew thinks this passage he is quoting comes from Jeremiah shows that he is departed from his usual practice, especially when using Mark, of checking the accuracy of his source, Old Testament reference. Matthew's source has blended Jeremiah's buying of a field and placing the deed in a pot with Zechariah's casting of 30 pieces of silver into the treasury, or to the potter. to create the fiction about Judas casting his 30 pieces of silver down in the temple and the purchase of the potter's field. The story of Judas' actions after the betrayal is one of the most revealing examples of the early Christians' fictional and imaginative use of the Old Testament as a book about Jesus. Here, two different legends have grown out of a combination of Jeremiah and Zechariah. One in which Judas bought Bloodacre, the other in which the priest bought it. You've got one account in which Judas buys the acre of land, and one in which the Pharisees buy the acre of land. Page 114. From Acts. This Judas, be it noted, after buying a plot of land with the price of his villainy, fell forward on the ground and burst open, so his entrails poured out. This became known to everyone in Jerusalem, and they named the property in their own language, Akeldama, which means Bloodacre. So we've got a completely different description of what went on here. In one, Judas goes out and hangs himself. In another, you've got the Pharisees buying a piece of land after Judas throws his the money back to them, and then goes out and kills himself. And then in another, he hangs himself. In another, he buys a plot of land, only to throw himself off a mountain. Why he had to buy it. Why he had to buy a plot of land in order to throw himself off a cliff, I don't know. It's fiction. Folks, if it doesn't make sense, it doesn't make sense for a reason. Because it's made up. Now, let's look, as I mentioned, what is the necessity of this Judas character to begin with? Page 117. Though Jesus most certainly have been captured by the authorities before he was killed, the rest scene in Mark is a fictional episode based largely on an Old Testament passage as predictions. Quote, "Let the scriptures be fulfilled," unquote, Jesus said as he is taken. At the scene in Matthew, Luke, and John are variations on the Mark's basic fiction. As some scholars have argued, the arrest scene seems contrived and unnecessary. Jesus and his movements were well known to the authorities. There was no need to resort to the, quote, slippery aid of hired traders, unquote, in order to capture him. Quote, "Day after day I was within your reach and I taught in your temple," unquote. Jesus reminds them at his arrest, Mark 14:49. It was hardly necessary to betray with a kiss one already so well known. The act is fulfilling prophecy again. The early Christian remembered that, quote, "the kisses of an enemy are perfidious," Proverbs 27:6. They also remembered the story in 2 Samuel 20:9-10, when Joab came forward, quote, "came forward concealing his treachery, and said to Amasa, 'I hope you are well, my brother.' And with his right hand he grasped Amasa's beard and kissed him. Amasa was not on his guard against the sword in Joab's hand. Joab struck him with it in the belly." We know that this passage became one of the basis of the story of Judas. because it is again echoed in Luke's version of the traitor's death. For when Joab stabbed Amasa in the belly, we learn from the supplicant, Luke's source, that, quote, his bowels poured out upon the ground. Just when Judas died, quote, he burst open, so the entrails poured out. Acts 1:18. And as we have seen, the same Old Testament book supplies Matthew's version of the death of the traitor. Suicide by hanging. The only purpose for this traitorous character of Judas at all was, again, to somehow comb back through what we now call the Old Testament and find passages, obscure passages, to somehow prove that this character in the book, in the Gospels, was a real, actual person and was the, quote, Messiah. As I mentioned before, many Jews are looking towards a messianic age. It is not necessarily, and I firmly agree with this, it's not a particular person that is the, quote, Messiah, but is an age. It's a time period. It is a future event. Whatever that event, however that event manifolds, it is a future event, and it is a Messiah of age. It's not a particular person. Many Jews look at it this way. That's the reason why they continue to be Jews and not Christians. So, I'm going to wrap this up today. I'm not going to go on with the crucifixion, not in this video. So, I'll be doing another video, finish this up. I think it's important enough to keep these videos as short as possible. And I just hope that even if you don't care for what I say, you know, many of you, I don't know that anyone that thumbs down my videos makes it this far, but if you have, for some reason, I want you to know I'm not doing this because somehow I'm against you personally. I'm not. I am trying. We are trying. This is our entire purpose on this planet. Me and others, like my wife. We are trying to open up your eyes. We are doing our very best to get you to try to see things as they are. And things as they are not always a wonderful thing. The people that you go and listen to online, the kind of people that draw in millions of views, all they're doing is telling you what you want to hear. They're not telling you any truth. And they know it. And they will be held accountable for it. Whether that accountability is God or the universe or karma, they will be held accountable for it. I know deep in my heart that what I'm doing is right. I am not nitpicking. I am not just trying to tear something down because I hate it. What I hate about Christianity is the ignorance, the stupidity of it. fight, the fight that me and others like me are waging, is against ignorance. It's not against you. It's not against individuals. It's against ignorance and stupidity. Understand. You can destroy us. You can destroy us. But you can't destroy an idea. And this is our time. The idea, its time has come. A new world will be formed, and that new world will be free from such ignorance and stupidity as the Christian church propagates. And I don't care. I don't care how, quote, liberal you are. You are still propagating a lie if you are a Christian. Your time is coming to an end. And you will either continue to kick against the pricks, or you will learn to accept it and learn to understand what it is that we are doing. We don't hate you. What we hate is ignorance and stupidity. I will be finishing up this book in another video, and I hope that those of you who stay and listen will receive some understanding, not from my words, not from Randel Helms' words, but the understanding that can only be given to you through the Spirit of truth that resides in people who write books like this, who resides in people who are only trying to propagate the truth. Thanks, and stay tuned. One more video about gospel fiction is coming up soon.